Hey everyone, thanks again for joining us on another Sunday. Morgan, will you go ahead and kick us off with the prayer and pledge, please?
Yep. So tonight I'm gonna read a prayer by Pope Pius XII. And it's a prayer for justice and peace. So I'm gonna give you guys a second to center yourselves in any way you see fit. Almighty and eternal God, may your grace enkindle in all of us a love for the many unfortunate people whom poverty and misery reduce to a condition of life unworthy of human beings. Arouse in the hearts of those who call you Father a hunger and thirst for justice and peace, and for fraternal charity in deeds and in truth. Grant, O Lord, peace in our days, peace to souls, peace to families, peace to our country, and peace among nations. Amen. Uh, and now I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Morgan. So today we have Dr. Lawrence Sanders coming to speak to us. So Dr. Lawrence Sanders, thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend and out of your Sunday evening to be here. We all really appreciate it and are looking forward to having a great dialogue with you. So please feel free to go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Sure. Thank you guys for having me here, for the nice welcome. Thanks, Annie, for reaching out. I see some familiar faces, some students I've had in class over the last couple of years. But if you don't know me, I'm Dr. Ashley Lawrence Sanders. I'm an assistant professor in the history department, and my primary focus is African American history. So I teach several African American history courses across campus: history of Black women, African American history before 1877, African American history after 1877. So some of you have been in some of those courses. So you know about my own personal enthusiasm for Black history. So hopefully that comes through today. And I was asked to talk a little bit about the significance of Black History Month. So what I'll do is I'll provide sort of a brief background of how Black History Month came about, then discuss some common misconceptions around Black History Month, and talk a bit about how we can continue to study and be interested in Black History Month once the month is over, and it is almost over, right? So first, just some background. So in 1915, Carter G. Woodson, who's a Black historian, he was one of the first African Americans to receive a PhD from Harvard, and likely the first, if not the second. There's still some debate over whether Du Bois was the first Black person to receive a history PhD or not, to receive a history PhD from Harvard. And Woodson starts this organization called the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. It's still an existing organization. It's now called the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. We call it ASALH for short. So it's been around 100 plus years. Woodson started this organization mostly because he was upset and dismayed by the type of history that was being disseminated throughout the academy, meaning in universities, and also in K through 12 education. So the type of history that's being published now is just in one word, racist. And this is not just the history that's being published in, say, Southern textbooks. This is actually throughout the entire nation. So what's being published in the North and in the West, in the Midwest, in states like Ohio, and in the South are all books that basically uphold this idea of Black inferiority. And pretty much if they do mention African Americans, it's usually in like the idea that Black people are incapable of political will or thoughts, of adequate citizenship, or of equal rights. A hallmark of this education was a rewriting of the history of Reconstruction, which was this really formative period for African Americans, where they're able to first, African American men can vote. This is where you get the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment are passed during Reconstruction. So one of the big parts of this sort of bad history and racist history is saying that, Reconstruction failed because Black people were not prepared for emancipation and freedom. So Woodson is seeing this history proliferate throughout the academy, and he wants to do something about it. The organization also emerges in the same year that the film Birth of a Nation premieres in 1915. And if you're not familiar with Birth of a Nation, it's this film that pretty much romanticizes and whitewashes the history of Civil War and Reconstruction and the creation of the Ku Klux Klan. So now we know it as this extremely racist movie, but in 1915, it was incredibly popular. It premiered in Los Angeles. It had big openings in New York and, and Boston, all of these cities. It was incredibly popular at the time. So Woodson, seeing all of this happen, and thinks that, African Americans need their own organizations in order to basically counter some of the really dangerous aspects of this type of history that's become, basically the mainstream type of history being taught to children up to adults. So he envisioned that it could provide both a corrective to this racist history and, actually have a history that would encourage African Americans to see themselves within the historical discipline. And for Black children in particular, to have an uplifting and accurate narrative of the lives of Black people within the United States, going all the way back to Africa. So, this is also, it's part of this concept of racial uplift and social uplift of the late 19th and early 20th century, which is providing sort of narratives that are going to help uplift the race. So it's within this organization and this background that Woodson starts Negro History Week in 1926. So Negro History Week begins as part of this sort of effort to popularize Black history and to create sort of a center of celebrations for African Americans during this time period. So he said in 1926, we're about 5 years off from the 100th anniversary of Negro History Week. So while Black History Month may seem like it's such an embedded part of our culture right now, 100 years actually is not that long of a time. When you think about sort of the span of history, it's been around for a while, but it's only really been a national popular thing in the recent couple of decades or so. So I want to get into a little bit of the misconceptions around Black History Month, because I actually literally just heard one of these misconceptions earlier today in a conversation with, some friends. So first, there's this misconception that Black people were given the shortest month of the year. And, this is a slight to Black people. As I just said, Black people created Black History Month. Nothing was given to Black people. This was a Black creation that was actually principally for Black people in the beginning. It was chosen because of its significance. It was chosen as a month in which, originally it was the week that Abraham Lincoln's and Frederick Douglass's birthday occurred. So this was the original significance of having it during a week in February. And then when it expanded out into a month in the 1970s, people kept it around these same dates because there was already a historical tradition within the Black community of celebrating Black history in this particular time frame. So no, Black people were not given the shortest month. Woodson wasn't asking permission to start Black History Week from anybody. He wasn't, sanctioned by anybody. He started it on his own. And it was through this and sort of a tradition of Black people, having sort of celebrations of history throughout this time period that we have what we call Black History Month now. The other thing is that I think it wasn't until really the 1970s that you saw the federal government really recognize Black History Month. I think it was at the US Bicentennial, and Gerald Ford sort of acknowledged the importance of Black history as part of US history. And, the fact that Black History Month at that point had been celebrated, for half a century or so to that point, meant that, finally realizing within a mainstream society the importance of Black historical work. Now, this was also, after a push towards the month happened. And that push was based in a Black studies movement and a Black student movement across the United States in the late 60s and early 70s. Many college campuses and K through 12 campuses had a real push to actually include the study of Black people in their curricula. And this was, the Black studies movement is the most well-known aspect of it, but there was a Chicano studies movement at the same time. There was an Indigenous studies movement at the same time. It was the idea that these stories were histories that needed to be told. University of Dayton's campus had a similar movement on their campus in the late 60s and early 70s that led to the formulation of the organization you guys know as BATU. So there was a Black studies movement and a call for a Black studies department on this campus in the late 1960s as well. So this all led to people pushing for a broader and longer study of Black history, Black History Month, okay? So just to recap, No, Black people were not given the shortest month of the year to study and to celebrate Black history. That month was a month selected by Black people. So this is a common misconception that I like to clear up for people. I just had someone say, why were we given the shortest month of the year? And I was like, head explosion. Not gonna even like dig Carter G. Woodson up for him to be like, how dare you? Nobody gave us anything. We had to fight for everything we had back then, every little bit of Black history. Another misconception that I want to sort of clear up, and I think this is like an important one, particularly because we are on the last day of Black History Month, is that neither the founders of Black History Month, or Negro History Week, as it was called, nor the many generations of Black Americans that have existed and reinforced this tradition over the years ever intended Black history education to begin and end during the month of February. So Woodson, of all people, having created an entire organization dedicated to the popular dissemination of Black history and Black historical scholarship, knew the importance of an enduring Black historical tradition, meaning that this was a month to center celebrations around. It was not a month to begin and end celebrations on. So, early Negro History Week, there were Black history pageants, there were guest speakers, there were a lot of activities within the public education system given to Black teachers in particular to give to Black students. Black students throughout the nation, as I mentioned, had to deal with a lot of racist textbooks, a lot of histories that were being taught as part of curricula that deliberately erased the history of African Americans. Negro History Week was designed partially to counter that. So in something called the Negro History Bulletin, Woodson actually would outline activities that teachers could use in classrooms to get their kids interested in Black history, to learn more about Black history. He had quizzes, he had like activities that they could that they could use, readings. This was really like trying to fill in a gap that did not, of materials that didn't exist for most teachers, for most Black teachers. So Black teachers really consumed this, and they really leaned into Negro History Week to center a lot of their education and celebration and studies around Black History Week. So no, he never wanted it to begin and end during February. Definitely not a man who dedicated his entire life pretty much to Black history. Did not think Black History Month was the end and be all for Black history and Black history scholarship. Black History Month is at the center of a much longer and broader Black history movement. And so, we call Carter G. Woodson one of the founders of this Black history movement in the 20th century, but really Black historians have been writing Black history since, there have been Black people in this country. So some of the earliest histories actually were written in the early 19th century in the US, where you'd get these like great men and great women series of histories about Africans in America. All throughout the 19th century, you got this type of scholarship about, well-known Black Americans. Carter G. Woodson comes in like a really more sort of professionalized academic field of history now. And he starts to link together this like academic history through the Journal of Negro History, which is now the Journal of African American History, and, the Negro History Bulletin, which is for like laymen, basically, like everyday people who are interested in these topics. So a timer doesn't go off today where we're like, well, that's enough Black history today, so we're done, moving on to something else. A clock doesn't end. The way that it's been treated and sort of derided as recently in sort of popular culture as why do we have a month just for Black Americans, or saying that Black history, we should celebrate Black history every day. We should, but I think that also misunderstands what this month was intended to do, which is to actually have a time to celebrate the history and acknowledge the history of African Americans in a centered way. The other thing that I'll note is that the significance of Black History Month is meant to not just learn fun and interesting facts about Black Americans, which is, I think, some of the education that some of us got in K through 12, which I enjoyed, learning about all the Black inventors and, the first Black person to do this and the first Black person to do that. Woodson and other Black historians wanted to move the narrative away from sort of celebratory first to a deep engagement with the legacy of Black Americans in the United States, and to reflect on how this history informs our current world. So in that same vein, I, in this tradition, and other Black historians see Black History Month as a call to action. So if you care deeply about the conditions of Black people in the United States, you have to learn, know, and constantly engage with the history of African Americans and all its complexity and nuance. For the handful of you guys here who have taken courses with me or are taking courses with me, you know I don't shy away from controversial topics, and I do not give easy answers. So, you know, what I do encourage is that in tradition of doing Black historical scholarship, we all think of it as an entryway to action. When you're aware of the history, what you do next is much more important. So Woodson's endeavor when creating Negro History Week was not just necessarily a feel-good measure, but it was an attempt to create a pathway for action and activism. Black History Month is a jumping off point and not a final point of action. So I'll just close here with a kind of very specific message to you guys, which is that, you know, I encourage you all to learn about the Black history that is closest to you and inhabits the spaces that you inhabit. So that means for all of you wanting to deeply engage with Black history, to start with the history of Black people here in Ohio or in Dayton or on the University of Dayton's campus. This history deeply informs the present state of race in the state and the city and on the campus that you all live and go to classes on, and the continued struggle that students of color, including Black students, continue to experience. This is all informed by knowing the Black history, and there's a very rich Black history tradition in Ohio, in Dayton, and on your very university. I'll just quickly pitch the Symposium on Race that's coming up next week, which I think will be an excellent place for all you all to begin to do this a bit outside the classroom, where everybody from students to faculty and staff and alums will be talking about race on UD's campus in a historical perspective and a contemporary perspective. And some of these histories are really interesting. There's testimonials and histories from people who've experienced a very different UD, or some people who experience a different UD from maybe you have, and they're your classmates and your fellow flyers. So learning about this space, I think, in the world that you inhabit, really helps you thinking about your space and, you know, beyond just, you know, learning specific historical facts. I think historical facts are great. I'm a historian, but I think the narratives that we create around these facts are even more important. For many of you who witnessed the events of last summer and wanted to get more involved with anti-racism and learning histories, you know, this is just the beginning, right? So what you do next is incredibly important. The Black historical tradition actually delivers a real pathway for understanding what you do next, because you see a history of a freedom struggle for people in this country that dates back to the 1600s and beyond. All right, so I'm gonna stop there. And if you guys have any questions, please do feel free to ask.
Okay, I'll go ahead and ask my question. First of all, hey, Dr. Ashley Lauren Sanders, how are you?
Jada, how are you?
I'm good. I miss your class so much. But I know that you and me have kind of talked about, so from one thing that we specifically were talking about when we were in class last semester was the letter from W.E.B. Du Bois that the University of Dayton released. And I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. So we've also talked about how, like, History 103 and its involvement of Black history. So that's something that I've brought up at Senate before. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of comment on UD's history with Black students and how welcomed they've been here, if you want to put it that way. And then maybe how the University of Dayton itself could better History 103 to include more Black history. I also think that's something really important to kind of know while we're talking about it.
Sure. Well, what I can say, and I don't think it's a secret, is that the department is undergoing a review of History 103 as we speak, to deliberately include more African-American history as being taught part of 103. This is something I work on as part of the executive committee in the department. And of course, I'm very passionate about myself. I taught 103 last semester. I understand that in a global history course, some things get left out, but I think, the conclusion that we've come to is that when we want to critically engage ourselves in a particular place and time, African-American history has to be a part of that. And that doesn't, negate the global nature of the course in order to do so, particularly because African-Americans are a global people. In the 20th century in particular, you're seeing Pan-African movements, you're seeing Black internationalist movements. Even recently, you've seen a global Black Lives Matter movement that spread throughout the entire world in some sense, either in solidarity or in actual actions within many different countries. So that's one thing that I think we're moving in the right direction on 103. Other than that, I think that there's a very rich history of Black student activism at UD. I think, if you go to any of the symposium events this week, you'll probably hear a bit about it. There's a Black history timeline that Batu put together. But the notable thing is that it's been about 50 years or so since, Batu called for the creation of Black Studies department. And that's something that hasn't quite yet materialized, I think, in the way that the university and many students would like for it to be realized. I think, though, in the future, we will see an Africana Studies major, maybe. I know right now it's a minor. I don't want to speak out of turn. Someone from the dean's office will be like, that's not true. But I think that, going forward, there's been a closer attention paid to the fact that, one, knowing African-American history is really an entryway into learning a lot about this country, and a lot of different narratives about this country than I think many of you may have heard, in your regular United States history teachings in elementary, middle, and high school. Like I said, if you take a class with me, we dismantle some of that just a little bit, a lot at times, right? But to Jada's point, I think that, this is something that Black students in particular have been pushing for on this campus for a long time. I think that there needs to be more done to recognize the unique perspective and situation of Black students on this campus. The Du Bois letter, which we did talk about, is interesting because Du Bois was writing all of these universities at the time to be like, how many Black students do you have? How many Black students do you have? And, Dave's response was telling, but also it was kind of like not telling in a lot of ways, because that's just how universities were at the time. It was said so flippantly because that's how it was. And I bet if you dig into the archives from, that time period, you'll see a lot worse stuff than that Du Bois letter. In fact, I know you will, because I've seen some of it. And I think that there's been an increased amount, thanks to student activism in particular in the last several years, to really try to bring this history to the forefront and to integrate it into the university's history in a way that I don't think it is integrated right now. Hopefully that answered your question, Jada.
No, that definitely brings a lot of clarity, because I think a lot of people in SGA, or not even SGA, I think just a lot of people on campus in general, just don't really get that perspective of how much Black history really is within History 103. So I just definitely thought that was something that needed clarification to let people know that this is something that the department is pushing for, and especially that Black students have been pushing for. And also just how Black history definitely does affect the amount of Black students that we have on campus. So when people read that Du Bois letter, basically saying that UD does not want Black students here, there's a correlation that draws that to say, that because the University of Dayton took this stance back then, that definitely affects the enrollment that Black students have on campus today, which I'm pretty sure is still less than 1,000 Black students, but which is also another demand that Batu made back in the 90s. But
yeah, it's that Batu made that back in the 60s, in 1969, right? That there should be 1,000 Black students on Dayton's campus. So they haven't quite gotten to that point, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, to your point, 103, I think 103 is, it's the first history course most students take, right? So it's very important, in drawing students in, whether or not they're interested in history or not. I don't think that, it's not going to turn into a course where all you do is Black history. That's just not how any of these courses work. but there should be enough that you get sort of a basic understanding of how Black people are integrated within a global story as well. Black people in the US, Black people in the diaspora and beyond. You know, because I teach African-American history, and I know by the time students get to my class, you know, this is the first sort of extensive amount of African-American history many students have gotten. And for a lot of you, I don't get you until your juniors and seniors now. So I think that says a lot, that we should be, you know, having students have this base education when they first come in. I think the department and university agrees. So. Other questions?
Does anyone else have any other questions for Dr. Lawrence Sanders?
No other questions? Okay.
All right, well, Dr. Lawrence Sanders, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your Sunday evening to come and speak with us. I think that this was a very great conversation, very eye-opening for the campus in general, like Jada said. So we do really appreciate that, and feel free to stick around for Senate, but if not, I totally respect that you want to get back to your Sunday evening.
Sure, no, lots of fun class prep grading stuff to do, but thank you guys for having me. Bye.
All right, Michael, do we have any student funding presentations tonight?
No.
Okay, thank you. Grant, will you go ahead and do attendance then?
Barat Ali.
Here.
James Brew.
Here.
Jada Brown. She's here. Jada. Jules Carr-Chellman.
Present.
Natalie Coppolino.
Here.
Morgan Cox.
Here.
Lillian Dickman.
Here.
Michael Fields.
Here.
Sofia Garcia.
Here.
Jessica Garvin.
Present.
Mason Gordon.
Here.
Daniel Hennessey.
Present.
Courtney Henthorn.
Here.
Hannah Hobie.
Here.
Jake Jagles.
In attendance.
Bridget Mooney.
Here.
Drew Moyer.
Alive and breathing.
Ryan Pearson.
Here.
Annie Philbin.
Here.
Grace Pierucci.
Here.
Kat Pistoni.
In attendance.
Tommy Reese.
Here.
He's here. Luis Robel.
I'm here.
Jack Santi.
Here.
Kelly Stewart. Kelly. Ben Thomas.
Here.
Jacob Troutwine.
Here.
Rachel Veneman.
Here.
And Alec Warren.
Here.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thanks, Grant. So do we have any public announcements today? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a public announcement. All right, seeing none, do we have any public comments and concerns tonight? I know that the sign-up sheet for that is blank, but if anyone did have something to add, feel free to unmute yourself.
So I know election season is closing in fast, and I know that you all have definitely had some meetings about that with Tyler. And so Tyler and I were talking, and I just wanted to speak on briefly on elections. The last several election cycles have had weird things happening, and people kind of not really being civil at times, or people trying to sneak in and hack things and all kinds of weird stuff. And so I just wanted to share, particularly since Tyler's not here, that we really hope that the elections process is civil and rooted in the values of SGA and the university. And so we certainly want people to follow the elections rules and guidelines and handbook. And so if there are any concerns that you have or questions about elections rules that you have, please reach out to Tyler. It's not helpful to kind of talk about those things behind Tyler and not share any concerns that you have, or we're not really trying to get people in trouble. We're just trying to make sure that elections are fair and equitable. And so if you have any concerns throughout the elections process, please reach out to Tyler. She is very quick to respond, very knowledgeable about the elections policies and procedures. And so that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that. Did anyone else have any public comments or concerns? All right, seeing none, are there any SGA members who would like to give a report?
I can give a quick overview of our meeting on Friday with Steve Hernan, who's the Executive Director of Housing and Residence Life. So Tyler, myself, and Meg and Steve all met on Friday to talk about some of the barriers that may present themselves with people who are in executive leadership with RHA, as well as anybody who's a neighborhood fellow or RA running for president or vice president for SGA, as well as president and vice president for RHA. So the rule will still be upheld by Housing and Residence Life that anybody who holds the position of RA, fellow, or president, I believe, and vice president, I believe, of RHA will not be able to hold the position of president and vice president of SGA congruently. What has changed and been updated is that there will now be a second option for those who are elected president and vice president of SGA. They will now have the option to have either their housing covered or have a scholarship or stipend. So that is now a new option to try to take down the barrier between people who struggle picking between one job or another. So again, now there will be an option for the president and vice president of SGA to either choose their housing covered or have a scholarship. Amy, did I miss anything or have anything else to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I was going to put it in the chat though. If you are interested in having your housing covered, that's only if you live in university housing. It would not cover landlord housing.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, university-owned housing only. And this decision was made, because Housing and Residence Life saw that 96% of our undergraduate population does live in university-owned housing. All 4 years, we are a highly, highly residential campus. And so, as well as they recognize that there may be a barrier for students to seek those positions. So that is the update that Tyler wanted me to give on behalf of her, as she was unable to make the meeting tonight. So if anybody has any questions about that, I'm sure Tyler, Amy, or Chris can answer those as well.
All right. Thanks, Drew. Do any other SGA members want to give a report? Just feel free to go for it. Yeah, Luis.
Yeah, sure. I can talk about Luis and I.
Yeah, Jules, you go first.
Okay. All right. Well, Luis and I have been making some really good progress on creating a training that's specifically centered around creating some student intervention with micro and macroaggressions, like within the community, specifically focused on racially charged micro and macroaggressions, and sort of how to help members of the community learn how to recognize and make people feel more comfortable in situations like that. We had a really good meeting with Megan, which I think we might have talked about last week already, Luis. And we just had a meeting with an instructional designer this week who is going to help us out a little bit on creating some substantive material for the training program. So we're making a lot of progress, and we're kind of excited to see where it goes. Luis, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, like Joel said, I mean, this is something that me and Joel's are really passionate about. So we've really been putting in a lot of work so far. We've met with, I think like at this point, like 4 professionals already to like just really get some guidance and stuff, doing a lot of research. And our goal is to finish a training to present by the end of this semester. So then by next semester, it can actually, be implemented and stuff like that. Yeah, so like that's definitely one thing. Another thing that I wanted to say, like a part of my reports, one of my committee members, Gabby, she had the Tough Talk this past Wednesday, and it was at max capacity, obviously, path points and stuff like that. But also the fact that there was a lot of people, it also increased the chance of people being educated. So it was a really good event, in my opinion. I think there were some uncomfortable moments, which is always great when making progress, especially on this campus, where a majority of students will avoid uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable conversations, right? So it was a really good event. A lot of people learned things. Some people stayed behind and were like saying some of their comments, stuff like that. So it was really nice. But yeah, so if you were there, thank you for coming. If you weren't there, you definitely missed a good one.
All right, thanks so much, Luke. Oh,
wait, I got one last thing. I'm sorry.
No,
and then
good.
also, so like the MEC pop-up lounge was it's every Friday from 2 to 5. I know some people had meetings, some people had work, they were busy, right? Mason was there, what is it called? And then, yeah, I don't know, like Mason was there and everyone really liked Mason. So what is it called? I think it's really important, like I said before, if SJ actually wants to get involved with the UD community, then you have to get involved with the UD community. Another thing too, which is like not like on a more like negative side, I guess, is that if we're an organization that preaches diversity and inclusion, we need to be in those spaces to learn about diversity and inclusion. And I know that there's people who were free during that time on Friday and you just didn't go, which is okay, right? But like, that's fine if you don't want to go, but you can't preach that you're about diversity and inclusion when you're given the opportunity to follow on your word and you don't. So I kind of just want to say that just to try to hold you all accountable. But yeah, I do know some people were busy as well, but if you have any questions or comments, please definitely let me know. Thank you.
Absolutely, Luis. Thank you for giving us that reminder. But is there anyone else who wanted to give a report this evening?
I can go. This is for the town hall we had just this last week. We did really great. I mean, we had like about 300 students come in and join us. A lot of them, they wanted us to kind of add a variety of things to campus to, accommodate to them. Some of the things were adding more vegetarian options, making path points more accessible, keeping breakfast open until noon, adding more blue lights on campus to the student neighborhood and residential area as well. And then for the students who complain about or who make complaints about house problems to be fixed sooner. And then the Mary Crest fire alarms go off very often. And about 15 minutes into our meeting or into the town hall meeting, 15 minutes before it ended, the fire alarm went off. So I don't know if there's a way that we could, decrease the number of them occurring. But that was pretty much it, unless I missed anything. First year representatives, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is just the order was kept. We had a lot of good feedback in the comments. A few people spoke up. I wish more people would have verbally talked, but we had a lot of comments and it was good. So thank you, Ryan Pearson, for helping lead that.
All right, thanks, you too. Did anyone else want to give a quick report tonight?
I can speak real quick. I don't know if you were going to touch on this, Natalie, about the graduation meeting that we had on Tuesday.
I was going to, but if you want to just go ahead and talk about it, you totally can.
Okay, awesome. So for those of you guys who don't know, a bunch of us seniors met with some other seniors as well as the administration this past Tuesday just to discuss what they're thinking about for graduation. So right now they presented 3 ideas. The first one would be a completely virtual graduation over Zoom or a similar platform. That way there's unlimited guests and you can have your family invited and everyone is safe from COVID. Second option was that we would have an in-person commencement in the arena, but it would be split into 6 or 7 groups crammed into a weekend. And so it would be a couple hundred students a day. And then the third option was a full commencement, but it would be outside, probably at Welcome Stadium, which is our football stadium. The only downside of this is that we don't know what the weather is going to look like. So we could plan out a very nice graduation and then have it canceled last minute because of weather. And with that third option, it's likely that there would be limited family and guests. So some guests, but not everyone you want. And yeah, that's about it. If you have any questions, reach out to any of the seniors. I think most of us were there.
All right, thanks, Tommy. I think Jess wanted to go next.
I was just going to do like a brief summary of how the sophomore town hall went. It all went super smooth. All the sophomores had like a really good opportunity to talk. We had about 90 to 100 participants. People weren't very talkative, but there were some really interesting points that came up. Lots of points about issues with the Git app, which I thought was interesting. Some Wi-Fi issues, and also just some miscellaneous questions about like what are we doing for our advocacy projects and what exactly do we do in our positions. But it was all pretty smooth and I enjoyed it a lot.
All right, thanks, Jess. Does anyone else have any reports that they would like to give?
I can go real quick. Following up on what Bara, Jess, and Ben said, we had 3 town halls this week for freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. They went really well. They already talked about that. And then SGA chats this week also went really well. Thank you to everyone who participated in those. I'll be putting feedback, the feedback we've gotten from students from those events together in a document and sharing that probably middle of the week. So keep an eye out for that.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Does anyone else want to give a report? Okay, seeing none, I will go ahead and jump into mine. So tomorrow, Annie and I are meeting with the diversity peer educator just to discuss when they'll be coming to Senate to talk with us and then what we want them to present on. We have a few pretty good ideas, but if anyone has any ideas for what we want them to present to us on, feel free to message either one of us before tomorrow afternoon so we can talk about that with them. Additionally, the John E. Riley Awards are coming up. So if you know of a junior who has shown great leadership, feel free to nominate them. And if you would like to do so, feel free to reach out to me for more information if you're interested. Additionally, St. Patrick's Day is also coming up. So Jen Clark, who runs the University of Dayton social media, kind of reached out to me as well as a few other organization leaders on campus about helping with an Instagram campaign. They wanted to bring back the Keep Your Porch Open campaign from the beginning of the year. So I'm still in talks with Jen about this, but as that approaches, I will let you know more so that we can possibly help participate in this. Also, I know that somebody touched on this a little bit earlier, but Tyler did come to our anti-racism working group meeting on Friday just to discuss elections and how she's making them as equitable as possible this year, and how things are going to be run during COVID and how they'll be virtual. She plans to come to Senate to give an update on that in the next few weeks. So she will be touching on that. And then Tommy did talk about graduation, 3 options, but Edvin wanted us to stress that no decisions are final yet. So if anyone has any other ideas, feel free to let any of the seniors who were in that meeting know so that we can pass that along to administration. And then finally, Anna, oh my gosh, Annie, Jada, James, and I are meeting with someone from the history department on Tuesday to discuss the incorporation and necessity of Black history in the curriculum, specifically in first-year history courses. So if anyone has anything specific that they would like us to address, please let any of us know before that meeting so that we can get that in there. But other than that, I don't have any other updates. So Jagles, will you kick us off with Senate floor?
Of course, thank you, Madam President. The time is 6:45 p.m. I hereby call Senate floor to order. Will the secretary please call the roll of voting members?
Yep. Barat Ali,
Here.
James Brill,
Here.
Jada Brown had to leave the meeting early today. Jules Carr-Chellman,
Present.
Morgan Cox,
Here.
Sofia Garcia,
Here.
Jessica Garvin,
Present.
Dan Hennessey,
Present.
Hannah Hobie,
Here.
Drew Moyer,
Here.
Ryan Pearson,
Here.
Grace Pierucci,
Here.
Tommy Reese,
Here.
Luis Rogel,
I'm here.
Jack Santi,
Here.
Kelly Stewart, Ben Thomas,
Here.
Jacob Troutwine,
Here.
Rachel Veneman,
Here.
and Alec Warren.
Here.
Great. I have the count at 18 voting members.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Do we have any points or motions tonight? Director Pearson.
Motion to bring Senate Bill 2021-24 to the floor.
Thank you, Director Pearson. Do we have a second?
I second.
Seeing a second from Director Cox. All those in favor of bringing Senate Bill 2021-24 proposed Finance Committee handbook changes to the floor, please raise your hands at this time. All those opposed. Seeing majority in favor, we will go to this bill. One moment while I share my screen. Issues and Bylaws, Chairman Gordon, you have the floor.
All right, so these are some changes to the Finance Committee handbook that Vice President Fields brought to me. It's just a couple of small things that he recommends be changed. The first is no longer to fund physical improvements to housing, because we just recently did that and it's not something that he believes should be funded, and I happen to agree with him. We can look past these ceremonial items because that was not clarified. And the last thing is about new organization funding. So recently we funded a new organization. I forget the name of it, but it was like the Investment Banking Club or something. And so we want to change the bylaw or the Finance Committee handbook to demand that they send at least one person to represent them. And then we also have stipulations for their presentation. So in their presentation, they have to tell us the goal of the organization, the purpose of the funding, and the plan for self-sustainment after we give them the one-time grant. And then that looks like it. So basically, they just have to come and talk to us to get their money to get their organization started. I yield my time.
Thank you, Attorney General Gordon. Do we have any further points or motions?
Yeah, point of information.
Senator Carr-Chellman.
Okay, so in the bill, there are two clauses, and one of them says the attendance of the presenting student organization is required for funding. And then the last one says that at least one member of the organization must be sent to represent the organization's request and interest in order to receive funding. So I'm wondering if that first clause, is that saying like, it seems like not all that specific, mainly like, are they asking the membership of the organization to come, or and like if not the membership, then is it just the one member? And then if that's true, then why have both? I yield my time.
This was written by me yesterday a little bit quickly, so I apologize for the redundancy in the two clauses. The top one basically just says that the organization has to be present, and the bottom one clarifies who has to be present, so just one member who represents the organization's interests. But that can certainly be reworded if you would like that.
Point of information.
Out of order, Senator Carr-Chellman. I do not believe I heard Mr. Gordon yield his time. Thank you, Attorney General Gordon. Senator Carr-Chellman.
So would it be favorable to strike the first clause that says the attendance of the presenting or student organization is required for funding? Because I don't know, it seems like it might be kind of given in the last clause. I don't know.
Do you yield your time? Thank you, Senator. Attorney General Gordon, is that a favorable change?
That's favorable.
Senator Carr-Chellman, would you mind going ahead and striking that clause from the bill?
Sure.
Thank you. Any further points or motions at this time?
Move to the previous question.
Thank you, Director Pearson. We've got a motion, the previous question. Do we have a second? Seeing a second from Director Rogel, all those in favor of moving the previous question, please raise your hands at this time. All opposed. Seeing a majority in favor of moving the previous question, we will now go into voting procedure on Senate Bill 2021-24, proposed Finance Committee handbook changes. Please go ahead and vote. By a vote of 18 to 0, Senate Bill 2021-24 is passed. Any further points or motions at this time?
I motion to bring Senate Resolution 2021-20 to the floor.
Thank you, Senator Thomas. We've got a motion to bring Senate Resolution 2021-21, Senate action on academic years 2021 and 2022-2023 budget increases. Do we have a second? Seeing a second from Senator Jules Carr-Chellman. All those in favor of bringing Senate Bill 2021-21 to the floor, please raise your hands at this time. All those opposed. Seeing none in opposition, we will go to this bill. Senator Moyer, you have the floor.
Thank you. If you all want to kind of take a look within here, this is basically legislation that holds the administration kind of accountable in writing with us with the new budget increase that was granted last week over the next 2 academic years following this year. It also goes into heavy detail about what our estimated budget increases would go towards. So the creation of our own version of like a student fund to help them be involved in tear down barriers on campus, going more towards the direct funding of student organizations, and then also thanking the administration for granting us this budget increase in the middle of a global pandemic, where we are the only organization on campus whose budget has not been touched during this pandemic, as well as we are the only organization on campus that has gotten a budget increase, as well as, you know, we just wanted to thank them for their work and believing in us and recognizing that we are doing things that benefit the student body. And this is just thanking them for their work and believing in us. I yield my time.
Thank you, Senator Moyer. Do we have any points or motions?
Yeah, point of information.
Senator
Moyer,
Thomas.
Sorry, Senator Moore, could you
Go
just
ahead.
walk me through? I'm just curious of how you put those numbers roughly together, whether it's based off previous years or I yield my time.
Senator Moyer.
The numbers of what? Of that are like where it says an estimated 3,000 and an estimated 30,000? Is that the numbers you're talking about, referring to? Okay, I see your head. So what we did was the math. So going forward, so like in the academic year of 2022, 2023, we should have an increase of $4 per student and per semester. So we did some math. Director Pearson, myself, Vice President Fields worked on this and kind of estimated based off of our current student population that we have. And then we took a few students away and to kind of account for in the next few years, higher education as a whole is expecting a decrease in new students. So we kind of took away some students of our current population to kind of create that buffer in case we do lose students in the coming years. And then from that math of taking away our rough estimated undergraduate population, we then accounted for the increase of budget and then came up with it would be about a $61,500 increase to our budget overall. And from there, we then went in and broke that $61,500 up and assigned it into each of these different areas / creations at the discretion of the Vice President of Finance when these funds are allocated. I yield my time. If that answers your question, I yield my time.
Thank you, Senator Moyer. Any further points or motions?
Yeah, point of information for Moyer. In point F, what do you mean by co-curricular opportunities?
Do you yield your time, Senator Reese?
Yes, I do. Jaggles.
Thank you. Senator Moyer.
Oh dear. Basically what that means is different clubs and activities on campus that some students may not be able to afford or be blessed with financial gainings or have the financial ability to pay for different clubs or activities or fees on campus. And so to kind of tear down that barrier of them becoming a bigger part or more interconnected part of our community, this fund would be kind of a way for them to apply for this, and we could award it based on need for them to be able to join different clubs and organizations that require a joining fee or membership fee. If that, Ryan or Director Pearson, does that kind of envelop what our ideas were there? I don't want to miss anything. He's nodding his head, so I'm assuming yes. I yield my time.
Thank you, Senator Moyer. Do we have any further points or motions?
Move previous question.
Hearing a motion, the previous question. Do we have a second? Seeing a second from Senator Garvin. All those in favor of moving the previous question, please raise your hands at this time.
I object.
All those opposed? That would be you, Senator Carr-Chellman.
Yes, I'm opposed.
Thank you. What is the nature of your opposition, Senator Carr-Chellman?
I just want to amend the word hopes to plans in the fourth whereas clause, just to have stronger wording in the resolution. It's just something I noticed while I was reading it. I yield my time.
Senator, would you like to make a motion to amend that?
I move to amend the word hopes to plans in the fourth whereas clause.
Senator Moyer, is that a friendly amendment?
No, because we are still in the process of gaining these funds, as well as these are our plans right now, but in a year from now, many things could change within campus. So this is still at the discretion of the Vice President of Finance and the entire Senate, as the Vice President of Finance will recommend all funds and the Senate has to approve that. So hopes is the word we put there because this is still very much up in the air, and kind of because we haven't received this quite yet. So hopes is the wording that we use because we still need this approved by VPF and the Senate itself. I yield my time.
Thank you, Senator Moyer. Senator Carr-Chellman, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, that makes sense, and I rescind my motion.
Thank you. Any further points or motions at this time?
I move for previous question.
Hearing a motion, the previous question from Senator Moyer, do we have a second? Seeing a second from Senator Hobie, all those in favor of moving the previous question, please raise your hands at this time. All those opposed? Seeing none opposed, we'll move into voting procedure on Senate Bill or Senate Resolution 2021-21, Senate action on academic years 2021, etc. Please go ahead and vote now. By a vote of 17 to 1-0, Senate Resolution 2021-21 has passed. Any further points or motions?
I move to adjourn this meeting.
Hearing a motion to adjourn from Senator Moyer, do we have a second? Seeing a second from Director Cox, all those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hands at this time. All those opposed? Senate floor is adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a nice rest of your Sunday.